Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. This time we've got another black deck profile. This time though, it is not Vegex, it is Black Broly. So actually, I was bringing you guys this deck profile a pretty good while ago, but this thing was loaded with U3s, and obviously those cards are all banned now, so I kind of had to redo the deck profile, revisit it a bit, test it out a bit, wanted to make sure it was top quality to bring to you guys. It's definitely still a starting list. There are definitely still improvements that could be made to this, so I don't want to sound like it's the perfect Black Broly list, but it actually is pretty interesting. Like, before the U3 stuff got hit, I actually did beat a full power Vegex deck with this. I mean, granted, this included the U3s, but the U3s weren't the reason why I beat Vegex in that matchup, and I'm going to explain that as we get into the deck profile. But guys, of course, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways to do that. I'm going to drop an information card in the top right corner of the video. I'm also going to point out the links in the description below. We have the Patreon and the Gemmy app, where you can get some one-on-one coaching, get some CrossFit TG merchandise. Speaking of the merchandise, we have the merchandise store as well, Spreadshirt, down in the description below. Make sure to click those links if you want to be swaggy in CrossFit TG merch and also help the channel out. That stuff really helps out a lot, guys. That being said, let's get into this deck profile. So for the millionth time, I feel like, because I made this video over so many times, I will read you guys the leader, because a lot of guys probably don't know what he does or remember what he does. So Broly, when this card attacks the leader card, you may choose one card in your life, place it in your drop area. If you do so, place up 3 cards from top of your deck in your drop area. Then your opponent chooses one card in their hand and places it in their drop area. So a lot of drop area there. So basically, you create yourself a life, you mill 3, and then you make your opponent discard a card. So basically, you get some self-awakening. It is kind of unfortunate you don't get it to your hand, but he does fill your drop area 4 cards automatically, which is pretty relevant for some overrun we'll talk about later. Awaken when life 4 or less, you may draw 2 cards and flip over. Now keep in mind, the really important thing about this leader before we get to the Awaken side is that he's a Black Saiyan, so that works really well with some of the new Vegex support, which we will talk about. So milling 3 there is very important. You want to mill 3 pretty much all the time, and you really aren't gonna deck out in this deck. It just isn't really the case like Vegex kind of can be. I mean, obviously you can't deck out in Vegex, but you're never really gonna reach the point of your deck running so low, is my point, because on the backside you pretty much stop milling. So on the backside, when this card attacks, draw 1. Then you may choose one of your non-token, non-black battle cards and place it in your drop area. If you do so, your opponent chooses one card in their hand and places it in their drop area. So this is not a mono black deck. Like, it's not perfectly mono black by any means, but it is a mostly black deck with some different splashes we will talk about as we go through the profile. And it's so funny to me, by the way, how this is like a really early leader from the game's like earlier lifespan, and they had the foresight to balance the non-token, non-black battle card thing. That's kind of interesting to me. But anyways, activate main once per turn, choose one card in your hand, place it in your drop area, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, and KO it. So that's one of the really good things there too. I mean, obviously U3s aren't a thing anymore, but when they were, this guy did synergize pretty well with the U3s in that regard, putting them to the drop area. But there's still some pretty good synergy there with this leader and that effect that I will talk about later on in the video. But besides that, he's still pretty good at hand control. I mean, on the backside, the fact that he draws a card on swing and has a potential to make your opponent discard a card is very good. So basically, with that being said, we have the SS Gotenks Fusion of Friendship at 4 copies. Now, I did do a video about this a few weeks ago where I talked about some older leaders that are highly boosted by unison cards, this leader being one of them, because this leader is free played from the drop area when you happen to mill him if your leader is a Black Saiyan. And of course, our leader on the Unawakened side does mill cards, so that pretty much works out right there. The activate main +2, choose a card in your hand, discard it. This card gets plus 10,000 power for the turn. The -4 activate main, this card gets plus 20k power and dual attack for the turn. So now keep in mind that we're not Vegex. We don't have the ability to give our unison double strike inherently, which is kind of unfortunate, but you are playing a minor hand control / resource control deck. You're controlling the opponent's board, you're controlling the opponent's hand relatively well. So with that being the case, you don't necessarily need the double strike. Like, sometimes all you can need is a single strike attack to go through, and the fact that this Gotenks has the dual attack, sure, they can negate him once, but when you're going in for that last point of damage, you're going in with that Gotenks on his last dual attack swing, and you know, they can't really arrival to stop him, they can't counterplay to stop him, they have to have all the negates, otherwise they're pretty much dead in the water to this 25k attack plus whatever combo power you happen to have. So that in mind, he does work out pretty well in the deck, even though you can't give him double strike. Next up, we've got Supreme Kai of Time, Guardian of Space Time. We've got Time Agent Trunks, we got Time Agent Vegeta, all at 4 copies. I mean, these cards just, they get played for free if you mill them and if your leader is a Black Saiyan. And I do want to let you guys know this is a 52 card deck, I believe, so it is a bit more on the consistent side with your mills in terms of, like, you know, being a 60 card deck. This is more closer to 50, so your mills will be a little bit more consistent. Yeah, you do mill a little bit less than Vegex, but you still mill enough, and there are so many graveyard synergistic cards in a deck like this that it kind of just makes sense. But basically, whenever you mill these cards, they basically become an extension of your hand. Unfortunately, Trunks is not like a degenerate aggro tool anymore. He basically is just like a 3-drop blocker, so you will want to use him up for that purpose a lot more often than you may have been used to doing in old Vegex with U3. What I mean by that is you want to block with him because you're not going to swap him out for a Nagrishi anymore. That's not going to happen anymore. So you want to block with him on key swings, maybe a big double strike, maybe a big critical, and keep your life total high so that you can then again burst on the next turn when you attack with your leader. You don't want to be forced to awaken too early, because if you're forced to awaken too early, then you can't mill and get these guys out onto the field. Spring Kai Time, excellent card when your hand does dip low. You can kind of avoid your hand dipping low in this deck, but when it does, you will have the free 10k combo, which is nice. And then Vegeta, a free 19k beater that has some inherent removal. That's always going to be pretty solid. So very good lineup there. Now, here is one of the ways we're triggering our backside leader effect, Beerus Godly Majesty, a card that is incredibly good. I mean, I just got done doing a bunch of videos talking about how free play is bad for the game. That's why the U3 cards got banned, but at least this one takes a little bit more setup. So Beerus, when this card's placed in the drop area from your hand by a battle card skill, if Beerus Godly Majesty is not playing your battle area, you may play this card from your drop area. So he does basically have his own unique clause there in a way. You can only play him if you don't control a copy of him. How are we playing him to the field? We have Bardock Awakened Instincts. He is an Overwhelm 4, draw 2, discard 1 when you play him. Like I mentioned before, your leader does set this guy up as early as turn 1. So the fact that your leader basically inherently mills 4, that is pretty solid. Now we have a new card from set 10, new tournament pack card from set 10. Toa, Dark Imperial Scientist, 2-drop, 15k, Overwhelm 2, playing 3 copies. Auto, choose 1 card in your hand and discard it. When this card is played using Overwhelm, draw 1 card, then choose one of your black battle cards, and it gets plus 5,000 power for the turn. So another slightly aggressive tool there, but basically the point of her is you discard her, you play your Beerus, you can swing with both those cards. You know, that's pretty good value there. You're really not losing anything on playing the Toa if you're discarding the Beerus. And with that being the case, your leader can then sacrifice Beerus to make your opponent discard cards, and then if you happen to have another Toa or Bardock and then another Beerus in hand, you can continue to play Beerus. It's basically a way to get Beerus onto the field, then cycle him off the field so that you can then play more copies. So that works out pretty well there. Next up, we are playing a Kid Goku engine. We're playing 4 Sun Goku, The Adventure Begins, and 4 4-star balls. So basically, this is what you want every single turn 1. It is a little bit more consistent, once again, because we are playing closer to 50 cards. We're not playing closer to 60. So you do want a hard mull for this. I mean, just having this guy getting the 4-star ball every single turn is going to give you such huge value. You'll have inherently bigger hands than most modern day Vegex leaders will probably have, because if you see this guy in turn 1, you're going to be going off to the moon. Now granted, some Vegex decks might adjust to playing Kid Goku now. That's definitely a very viable engine for them to adopt now that, you know, the hyper degenerate aggro version is not super viable. But I don't think too many Vegex decks will play this, but we'll see when time goes on. But anyways, if you're playing this, you can outvalue a lot of the decks, which is basically the point I am trying to make. We are playing 4 Master Roshi Strict Instructor. We're not playing Vivity because, spoiler alert, you will be aiming to charge 1 non-black energy per game in most matchups. Now, I will say, as we get to the next slide, that color engine is very, very, I guess, debatable. But with that being the case, since we are not charging all black energy, Vivity doesn't happen to work for us. So we are playing 4 Master Roshi Strict Instructor. You get to 4 life basically whenever you want in this deck. So that works out pretty well. Next up, we do have a 10 card red engine. So basically alongside the 4 Beerus and the 10 red cards, we're playing 14 non-black cards. I think the Beerus is pretty much essential in this list, but let me tell you why the red engine works out well. So the red engine works out well because we're playing Kid Goku. Kid Goku pays 2 energy of any color, I mean, to play a 30k vanilla from the deck that can bleed any color you want. So basically we're paying 2 to play Zarbon from the deck, and that gets us, you know, some really big pressure. But then our leader can also sacrifice that 30k battle card on the backside to make our opponent continue to discard cards. Now, what goes along really well with a small red splash? Obviously, for Topo, this card is absolutely excellent. I will admit that this was the mindset I was in when Vegex was at full power, because I was building this to beat full power Vegex. So I wanted to have the access to the 4 Topo. You just basically charge a Zarbon or a Raditz, and then you have Topo online, which is pretty solid. Unfortunately, Topo does not trigger Beerus Godly Majesty, because while he's in your hand, he's not technically a battle card yet. Very weird, I know, but that's the case. So with that being the case, That's why I have this red engine in here. And then I am playing for 2 Raditz the Oppressor. It's just basically a random 2 of 1 drop red splash, but he is very, very good considering that Reboot Soul Striker is a thing, but this could be a different red card if you really wanted it to be. And final card in the deck, guys, because he was kind of awkwardly in the deck, couldn't really fit him on a slide with some other cards. We have 3 Hatchiyak Hatred Everlasting. I mentioned before that once you get to your awakened side, your leader no longer mills, so you do want to have a way to keep your mills up on your awakened side if you need to see some of your Trunks' Vegetas, Supreme Kai times, those things. This could definitely be bumped up to 4 if you really wanted to play additional copies. You can also swap this out for a card I'll talk about in a second, but basically my point is if you bump this up to 4, played a slightly bigger deck, that's definitely not a bad thing if you want to get more mills on your backside. But now going on some cards I want you guys to consider. One of the cards I just was talking about where you can kind of swap out for the Hatchiyak if it's a bit out of your price range, depending on what price it's at when Vegeta stuff all finally drops. You can definitely play Majin Buu Human Extinction Attack. For 1 energy, you get the 15k combo, but sometimes you are going to run into the problem of all your energy not being black. So with that being the case, you might want to ditch that red engine. You could definitely play the deck mono black, but then you're not going to be getting your leader's backside effect as often. I would still definitely recommend playing the Beeruses because you don't have to charge a particular color energy to play the Beerus. But if you were going to cut the red engine, you could theoretically play this card, and this card allows you to mill 4, which would kind of make up for that Hatchiyak mill, but you would have to change the deck a little bit drastically. Crisis Crusher Son Goku, this is a card that black decks were main decking while U3 was a thing. Now with black kind of being a little bit less prevalent, I don't think people are going to be main decking BMS as often. So I don't really think you need to main deck Crisis Crusher, but I would definitely consider it for the sideboard. And the reason I've said to being here is to basically tell you guys that now that Vegex is dead, or not dead, I should say, now that the degenerate aggro version of Vegex is dead, that red splash I had in there can basically be any color you want. You can play a 10 blue splash to get Senzu Bean and maybe a blue 30k vanilla. You can maybe play a green 10 card splash to complement the Beerus. Maybe you can charge a copy of Beerus if you need to. So that part of the deck is really, really flexible. I personally like the red splash, but it can be anything you want. Again, blue for bean access, green for some of green's best cards, things like that. You guys definitely should consider all this stuff. This is definitely a very fluid deck list. I want you guys to consider all the possible changes to make it better. So that being said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed the deck profile. I want to know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I will see you guys next time.